Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Catherine from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the 5 affordable rental units that are going to be offered at 166 Main Street in Watertown. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the available apartments. I'll also go over the application process, the lottery, and what to expect after the lottery takes place. So if you have any questions during this session, you're encouraged to either type them into the Zoom chat, or I'm going to be asking throughout the session if you have any questions, and you can go ahead and unmute yourself at that time to ask. And so this is a live session. You probably heard the disclaimer in the beginning saying that it's being recorded. And that's because it's going to be posted to YouTube under SEB Housing for anyone who wants to view it after the fact. And then if you have any questions after tonight's session, if you think of anything that, later on that you want to ask us, the best way to get in touch with us is info@sebhousing.com, or you can give us a call as well, and I'll give you that number. Actually, it's not on the screen right now, but it's 617-782-6900. Email is probably the best way to get in touch, but we are available for any questions after tonight as well. So just for some background information on who we are, SEB Housing, we are not the management team at 166 Main Street. We are a off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, collect and review lottery applications to determine eligibility, and then eventually run the lottery as well. So in the initial phases of this process, we are your main point of contact rather than the management office. But then further along in the process, if you're one of the top households after the lottery, you'll be put in touch with the management team to move on to the next step. So there are a few different steps in this process, and the lottery is just one of the first steps in the process. So just to go over it quickly, the first step really is to apply for the lottery. So if you're interested in this opportunity, you want to submit your application, and you can do so online. As you can see on your screen right now, there is a link there, and there's an online application for this lottery. There's also a paper application, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but the quickest way to apply, and maybe easiest for most of you, is that online application option. So once we get your application, if there's any questions that you have during the process before the lottery, you can get in touch with us. Second step in the process after you apply is if your waiting list position after the lottery is high enough, you'll be invited to move forward to submit your program certification with SEB Housing. That's the point in the process where you need to supply verifying documentation like pay stubs and that sort of thing, your tax documentation, asset verifications, because when you submit your lottery application for this affordable housing opportunity, you don't need to submit any of that. It's just an application form, and you're self-reporting your information. And then the third step in the process is if you've been approved by SEB Housing after the lottery for the affordable housing program, you've already submitted all of your documentation to us, you'll be then put in touch with the management team over at 166 Main Street, and they'll be doing their lease eligibility process from there, which is separate from the screenings that SEB Housing does. So their screenings might include a credit check, rental history check, that sort of thing. And once you've been approved by both of us, you'll be able to reserve an apartment. So if you haven't already, you want to go on our website. So sebhousing.com. If you click on affordable housing opportunities and you select I want to rent, you'll see a page specific to 166 Main Street. And you'll be taken to the page that has a little bit more information about this lottery, some photos, and then a downloadable version of the application, as well as the information packet. A lot of the information that I'm going to be going over tonight is from that information packet, but I won't be able to go over it in its entirety. So if you're interested in this opportunity, go ahead and take a look at that document. The JOT link, JOT form link, so the online application link, is also on that page, and so you'll see it there, as well as a paper application. So if anybody prefers to fill out a PDF form and scan it to us by email, you can do that. But again, we encourage you to fill out that online application. It will be pretty easy for you as long as you have access to a computer, or even on your phone. You can do it on your mobile device as well. So once you've submitted your online application, if you submit it through that online portal, you're going to receive an immediate confirmation email just saying, we received your application. If for any reason the online application is not an option for you, like I said, we have that paper app. That automatic bounce back email that you received saying that your application was received doesn't mean that everything is complete or we don't have any questions. That's just letting you know it was received. SCB Housing will review it within the next week or two and get back to you with your lottery application number if you're approved for the lottery, and let you know if any information is missing before we can enter you into the lottery. So application itself should only take you 10 minutes or so to complete. Like I said, there's no supporting documentation at this early stage, but it will be required later on after the lottery, assuming that you are one of the top households to be moving forward to the next step in the process. So the application deadline for 166 Main is April 16th, so just about a little bit less than a month away. And the online application will shut down at 2 p.m. on April 16th on that deadline. To apply for this lottery, you don't need to be a resident of Watertown. This is for anyone who wants to apply. However, there are 2 affordable units that will have local preference for Watertown residents and applicants who work full-time in the city of Watertown. So what that means is the waiting lists that are generated after the lottery will have priority for households who apply or live in Watertown and have identified that on their application. So a 2-person household on the 1-bedroom waiting list will have priority if they have Watertown residency over a family who does not. Okay, so 166 Main Street itself, the management team also has a website. So if you haven't seen it already, that's the link there on your screen. So it's live166main.com. There's additional information there about amenities, some different photos and things like that. So if you haven't already taken a look at that, please do. The units are expected to be available for May 1st. The lottery for this opportunity is April 30th, though. So there's still a couple of steps after the lottery. So you likely will not be signing a lease until at least June 1st would be my guess, because of the two verification steps that need to happen after the lottery, both with the management team and the lease screening, and then the program screening that SCB Housing will do. So 166 Main Street, brand new development located in Watertown, close to the Charles River, park, shops, restaurants. There's going to be 5 affordable apartments within the community. That's what this lottery is for. 2 of the affordable units are going to be rented to households with incomes at or below 65% of the area median income. And then the remaining 3 units are going to be rented to households with income or annual income at or below 80% of the area median income. So we'll talk about what those numbers mean in just a few minutes, and there's a lot of information about it in the information packet as well. Tenants will be responsible for utilities, which includes gas, heat, and hot water, electric cooking, electricity, water, sewer, and the rent for the unit. So the one studio unit that is a 65% AMI unit has one bathroom. The rent is $1,483. Give me one second here. The one bedroom that is 65% AMI is going to rent for $1,663. That one bedroom 65% unit is built out for persons with hearing impairments. So keep that in mind if you need that. Households who require the features of the unit will have the priority for those units if there is anyone in the lottery that requires that. There's also 2 one-bedrooms at 80% of AMI, and they will rent for $2,103. And then there's 1 two-bedroom unit that is also 80% AMI and will rent for $2,319. There are modern bathrooms, kitchen with stainless steel appliances, in-unit laundry for all of the units. And I think I have one question here. Yep, sorry, I just said that. So there is in-unit laundry, and that's for all units. So affordable, not affordable. It's right in the unit, which is great. So these affordable rents are not set in accordance with an applicant's income or financial circumstances. So this means that the rent amounts are not going to change based on whether or not your income changes. So for the housing program, the rents are set using a formula based on HUD, which is Housing and Urban Development's area median income for the Watertown or Boston area. So the rent might increase and likely will eventually increase one time per year. That usually happens in the spring after HUD has revised their area median income. Advance notice is always given. Usually it's pretty modest, between $25 and $75. The rent will never change in the middle of your lease though. So if you were to sign a lease for June 1st of this year, your rent can't go up until at least June of 2025. And so since we know that there'll be more interested and eligible applicants than there are available units, because unfortunately there's only these 5 units, that's why we have to have this lottery process. And the units will only be made available, the affordable units will only be made available to households that have income at or below 65 or 80% of the area median income. So again, let me know any questions as I go along. It's a lot of logistical information and just, eligibility processes and things like that. So the 4 eligibility requirements that are listed on the information packet. The first is that households, in order to apply or in order to qualify for this lottery, you need to have an income at or below the maximum income amounts that you can see on your screen right now. So if you're applying for a 65% unit, or actually you're just applying for a studio or a 1-bedroom, for example, those of us at SCB Housing will determine which of the income tiers that you qualify for. But in order to qualify for a 65% unit, if you're a 1-person household, you need to make below $67,535. And that figure is $82,950 to qualify for a 80% AMI unit. I'll talk more about those in just a few minutes as well. The second eligibility requirement to keep in mind for eligibility purposes is just that household priority is going to be given based on household composition. So for example, if you're a 1-person household, or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally going to be considered a type 1 household. So you could apply for a 2-bedroom apartment, but type 2 and just larger households in general are going to have priority and are going to be placed on the waiting list ahead of you. A lot more information is on page 7 of the information packet, and it details a little bit more about household type and size. Third eligibility criteria, households cannot own a home at the time of program certification, which is a few steps from now. But if you own a home now, you want to know that it will need to be sold prior to completing your program certification with SCB Housing. And then the 4th eligibility criteria, this doesn't come up very often at all, but you're not qualified for this lottery if you have financial interest in the development, if you're considered a related party. A related party could be a member of the management team that is going to be managing the property, the developer, the owner, anything like that. Okay, so to circle back on the first eligibility criteria to explain more. So these affordable units, like I said, are being made available at rents that are lower than identical units within the building. So they're only going to be made available to households that qualify for the affordable housing program. Although verification of income is not required at this stage in the process, you will be, if you qualify for the lottery and you get an email from us saying, here's your lottery application number, you applied for a 1-bedroom, you're eligible for the 1-bedroom lottery, you'll be given a documentation requirements guide as part of that email. And the guide really just details what types of documentation we're going to need from you depending on your sources of income and assets after the lottery takes place. So if you're one of those top households, you're going to want to take a look at the documentation requirements guide and have some of that documentation ready to go. And just to give you a basic overview of how your income will be calculated. So income is going to be calculated as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So this includes bonuses, overtime, any of that wage income or other sources of income that maybe don't come in every week, but they're more sporadic. The only exceptions are if you have a minor in your household who's earning a wage, so say a 15 or 16-year-old who's working, we're not going to count their wage income except for, well, actually, we're not going to count their wage income at all. But if you have a full-time student who's dependent, if they're also working, so someone who's over 18 that's a dependent full-time student, we're only going to count the first $480 of their income. So those are the only two exceptions. Otherwise, income is counted for everyone in the household. And we are required to count gross income. So even though you don't take home your full, the full amount of your paycheck, in many cases, the program does require us to use your gross income for eligibility purposes. Question here. So I thought there were 3 1-bedrooms on ad and on another page. So I believe there is, let me just scroll up again here and go into the, yep, so there are 3 1-bedrooms, but 2 of them are 60% units, 65% AMI, and 2 of the 1-bedrooms are 80% AMI. So there's a total of 3, but one of them is 65% AMI. So if your household has total household income that is at or below that figure, or if your income's a little bit higher, you qualify for the 80% one. So the rents are different, units have the same square footage, and all that. All right, so the way that we calculate income is not one size fits all because every household has unique circumstances. So some applicants are taking in a weekly salary that is the same year in, year out, week to week, while other families have self-employment or seasonal wages coming in. So if you're a seasonal worker or if you have more sporadic pay, in those circumstances, SEB housing is going to have to look further back into the past in order to project your anticipated income for the next 12 months. And then specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for your business. Your business expenses, if you are self-employed, will be taken into account. But unfortunately, if you're not self-employed, other expenses are not going to be taken into consideration. So if you're working and you submit commuting expenses or insurance expenses, anything like that, we're not going to be able to take that as a deduction, unfortunately. In general, any income that you have been making, we're going to assume that you will continue making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation, say from an employer that you're no longer working there, or the employer is writing a letter saying that bonuses or overtime aren't going to be available in the coming year, that sort of thing. When you're filling out your application, either online or by paper, make sure that you are listing every type of income coming into your household. So not just wages, even though that's what I've been stressing. If you have Social Security benefits, child support, unemployment, pension, compensation, that sort of thing, make sure that that's written down as well. So there's no minimum income for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team at 166 Main Street, they want to be sure that all tenants, regardless of whether or not it's a family renting a market rate unit or an affordable unit, they want to make sure that you can afford the rent. So they have set a minimum income amount that is on your screen right now. So if you're looking to rent a studio, 65% unit, the minimum income that your household could have coming in would be $44,400. This is approximate because if you have liquid assets or just money in the bank account, things like that, that the leasing office over there has proof of, they may qualify you based on that. So the maximum income limits are set in stone. The amounts on your screen will not change. That's a program requirement, but the minimum income amounts have a little bit of wiggle room because it's the leasing office that ultimately is going to make the decision as to whether or not your household qualifies when they're doing their lease screening criteria. If you have a mobile housing voucher, so if you have a Section 8 voucher, an MRVP voucher, for example, these minimum amounts don't apply to you because your voucher agency is going to cover part of your rent, of course. So you can disregard the minimum income amount. The maximum income limits do apply to everyone. There's also no asset limit for rental opportunities. So you might be retired, for example, and have a significant amount of assets in, bank account, stocks, that sort of thing. You can still apply for this lottery. However, we are still going, even though there's no asset limit, we're going to need to collect information regarding or related to your assets to verify them. And that's because if there's income being generated from the assets, we do need to count that income when determining your eligibility for the affordable housing program. So when you're filling out the application, just make sure that you're writing down, all your assets, bank accounts, PayPal accounts, stocks, that sort of thing, so that it's in there. Okay, so lottery eligibility. So as I said at the top of this session, if you're interested, we encourage you to apply early, get the process started. The online application is super quick and easy, so you can take a look at that after this session if you haven't already applied. I also want to mention that you can apply for more than one unit size. So if you think you might be interested in both a studio and a one-bedroom, you should indicate that on your application. There's really no downside to doing so, but there could be a downside to only listing one of those units as an interest to you on your application. And the reason for that is because, so say you only applied for a one-bedroom, but you actually decided that you might consider a studio apartment for yourself, that studio waiting list after the lottery could be quite long. So you may not have a shot at the studio unit if you don't apply for it on your lottery application. So if you think you might be interested in more than one unit size, definitely put that down on your application. Once we receive your lottery application, we'll contact you if anything appears to be incorrect. If you're filling out the online application, you will get an immediate notification in red print that something is missing or you've incorrectly placed information somewhere on the field. So it won't allow you to submit your application if you haven't filled it out completely. If you are found eligible for the lottery, you're going to be sent an email after we review it. So like I said, you're going to get that instantaneous email if you fill out this online application. That's not confirmation that you're eligible for the lottery. It's just letting you know that your submission was received. But within a week or two, you'll hear from SCB Housing, and the email will come from either no reply at scbhousing.com or info@scbhousing.com. That email will have your lottery application number, which is in the form of a series of numbers. That's the number that you want to keep handy because it's going to be drawn in the lottery. So it's meant to be an anonymous identifier so that your full name isn't called during the lottery. It's not a ranking of any sort at this point. It just corresponds to the order in which your application was approved. So if you were the very first person to be approved for 166 Main Street, your number, your lottery application number would be A.001. In that email with your lottery application number, it's also going to confirm whether or not you reported being a resident of Watertown or working full-time in Watertown. And if you've indicated that you live or work full-time in Watertown, you want to make sure that you're completing that accurately, because if you report that you are a Watertown resident and then afterwards you're not able to confirm that for us with verification, then you will be forfeiting your position on the waiting list. So just be careful when you're filling out the application to make sure everything's accurate. The email is also going to have confirmation of the bedroom sizes that you applied for. So also if you needed a hearing impairment accessible unit, so all of that information will be on there. Make sure that you review that email carefully to make sure that all of the information there appears accurate. You want to make sure that we have record of the unit sizes and everything that you intended to apply for. And then the documentation requirements guide will be attached to that as well. If you're any point in the process you're found to be ineligible, so say you receive information, you receive confirmation from us and it says you're ineligible because you're over income. If you think that that's incorrect, make sure that you reply to us and let us know. Sometimes with these online applications, what happens is some applicants are filling out the self-employment as well as wages by mistake, and they're just putting the income there twice. So just make sure that you're filling out everything correctly so you're not mistakenly pegged as being over income. So the lottery itself is going to take place on April 30th at 6 p.m. Similar to this session, it's going to be recorded on Zoom, and it will be the lottery will be held using a randomization website called random.org. So it's going to allow for instantaneous results. Lottery numbers will be randomized, and on the screen you'll be able to see it, and the results of the drawing will be shared with attendees, and then we will then have to sort the results after the fact. So every lottery number will be drawn during that lottery. So sometimes when you're thinking of a lottery or even an affordable housing lottery, you're thinking, okay, there's 5 affordable units, there's going to be 5 numbers drawn during the lottery. That's not how this is going to work, though. The purpose of the lottery is really to just establish an order of priority for the waiting list. So in general, if you're tuning in on the lottery night, it is more beneficial if your number is called earlier in the lottery, but it may not be the deciding factor as to whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process to rent one of these apartments. So for example, if you're drawn 15th and you're applying for a 2-bedroom and all of the 14 households that were drawn ahead of you are type 1 households, you're still going to have priority for that 2-bedroom unit over everyone who was drawn ahead of you. So you really don't know on lottery night where you ended up, because we still need to populate the waiting list after the fact, taking the local preference priority, the household type, and then also whether or not your household needs a hearing accessible unit into consideration. So the next day, by either that night or the next day, you will have an email from us confirming what your placement is on the waiting list. So you'll have more of an idea at that point whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process. And if you're drawn later in the process and your name is further down on the waiting list, you shouldn't lose hope at being able to potentially move forward in the process. Many times, several households need to be screened before the apartment is rented. So just keep that in mind as well. So when you're reviewing that lottery results email that I told you will be sent by the next day after the lottery, you're going to see your lottery application number and you'll be able to see where you fell on the waiting list. So following the lottery, you'll be connected to the management team and your contact information will be provided to them as well. So you'll be able to move on to the next step, which is applying for the lease. You'll have about 5 days to connect with the management team in order to initiate that lease screening process. And then just remember at this point, so SCB Housing is screening for your lottery eligibility, and then at the end of the process, we're screening for affordable housing program eligibility. We're not screening you for lease eligibility. That's what the management team is going to do. They'll be doing, likely a credit check, rental history check, that sort of thing to determine if you're eligible to rent with them. And then again, be aware that most leasing offices invite more households to complete the screening than there are available units, which is to make sure that the process is going as quickly as possible. So for example, there's 2 one-bedroom, 80% AMI units. There's going to be more than 2 households invited from the waiting list to complete the lease screening. And again, that's just to make sure that the process isn't held up by households that either are not interested any longer or who don't qualify for their lease terms. So for that reason, if you're the top household on any of the waiting lists, you don't want to immediately inform your current property owner, if you're renting, that you're giving notice to move to 166 Main Street, because there are still some steps in the process that need to take place. If you are lease approved, though, by the leasing office, that's the point in the process where having a position near the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial to you, because if you're the top person on one of these waiting lists, you're going to have top choice of an affordable unit. So you're able to tour the apartment, see which one is your priority, and then you'll be able to reserve an apartment with the leasing office. After you've reserved an affordable unit, the leasing office will notify SCB Housing that you've been approved to lease with them, and we will coordinate with you to get the submission of all of your income, asset, and tax documentation at that point, so we can complete your final program eligibility review. So hopefully by that point you've been able to review the documentation requirements guide that details, how many pay stubs we might need, how many bank statements, that sort of thing. And you'll have about 10 days to get that information into SCB Housing. We understand, of course, that it's a lot of information. So if you don't provide everything on your first attempt, that's completely fine. You'll be sent an incomplete notice detailing exactly what's missing. You'll have access to be able to ask questions and, of course, get in touch with us. And, no worries if you do not have everything into us on that first chance. We'll work with you. Okay, so once leased, you are finished with income screenings. You won't have to do any more income screenings until your lease renewal date. So at that point, you've lived at 166 Main Street for a year. We hope that you've loved your time there and you want to continue living there and renew your lease. If you do, you would need to submit verification to the leasing office at that point to confirm your continued eligibility for the affordable units. So if your income has increased after that first year of the lease, it doesn't mean that you no longer can live in the affordable unit. You can make up to, or your household income can now be up to 140% of the area median income. So if you applied and are leasing a 80% AMI unit, and say you're a two-person household, you qualified for that apartment because your household had no more than $94,800 in income. That same family after the first year can make up to $132,720 at the time of your recertification in order to remain eligible for the apartment. So there's some wiggle room there. You know, you don't have to worry about getting a raise or taking on another job that has some income. You may still be eligible after the first year to continue renting an affordable unit. So that's about all I wanted to get through tonight. Again, there's that lottery application link on our website, and there's also the information packet that has some more information on this opportunity. And I'll scroll back to the first slide here so you can see the online lottery application link here. And again, that is our suggestion for everyone to complete it through the online portal, just because you'll get the instantaneous confirmation that it was submitted, and it's probably easiest for you as well. Any questions? Application deadline, April 16th. So that is, just about 4 weeks away. And if you think of anything after tonight, you forgot to ask a question or something comes up when you're reading or when you're going through the application, please email us at info@sdbhousing.com. We'll be able to help you out and answer any questions you might have. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to getting your application. Have a good night, everyone.